You don't run the show.
Well, you're 21. Get to work. Be active.
Yeah, yeah, that would be perfect.
How do you see yourself different from others?
I'm very lucky.
These are some fun questions.
A lot of people in the Middle East believe stock options, violate Sharia. It's a nice group to be around and to work with. They want to change the world, already in trouble, and they're trying to find a way out.
That's a dream for many people. And you decided to leave that.
You can't put a price tag on that. They're not great, but everyone knows them and everyone uses them, right?
Okay.
So,
If I, as Ahmed, want to start a VC firm,
what makes you special?
should I come to you right away, be like, hey, I want to structure a VC firm?
Don't do it because it makes you look desperate. So, I'm not going to give you $10 million to invest the way you want. Is this investor crazy or am I crazy?
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the AI Best Business Show, the show where you'll best learn about money, startups, investing, technology, and anything related to the business world. Today with me, I have Hisham Kassim, a lawyer from the MENA region. I'll let Hisham introduce himself. Hisham, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed, for having me. My name is Hisham Kassim. I'm the senior partner at Levari Law. I'm based in Amman, Jordan. I head the US corporate and tax practice. Been doing this now for about 15 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long time in being in the law industry. Hisham, okay, you're a lawyer. What drew you to the entrepreneurship part of law?
Oh, versus other areas of law.
Yes.
Um, startups, technology startups, and VC investing, they tend to be more optimistic, happier people. They want to change the world. It's a nice group to be around and to work with. They're problem solvers, sort of looking at the future and seeing how they can make the world better. Other areas of the law, they're already in trouble and they're trying to find a way out. It's not always the most pleasant scenario to be in.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know if that answers your
No,
question.
this does answer it because like whenever we hear of a lawyer, we always hear about a lawyer that is in the court defending a criminal or solving a case. Uh, Entrepreneurship law, dealing with startups and technology is a whole different world. I guess, as you said, it's happier. You're dealing with people changing the world to doing better stuff, and it's just a different type of people you're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah.
As a lawyer and as a very law firm, how do you see yourself different from others?
Well, Levari is the only regional firm that specializes in VC and startup law in general. There are, of course, many firms in the region. Either they're local, they're just in one country, or they're the big international names. We're sort of a homegrown regional firm that's special. Like one of our areas is this practice area that I lead. Um, we try to meld best practice from the US and tailor it for the region.
Okay.
That's sort of our main role, actually, is sort of advising clients on what is best practice, but making the changes and the amendments that we need for the Middle East, because we can't just adopt things wholesale without thinking. Um,
In this adoption, when you're getting laws or like practices in the US and taking it to the region, I know different countries in the region have different regulations, different rules. How are you dealing with that? How are you packaging what you're offering?
so most of our clients register either in the US or in US offshoot, I call them, which are Cayman, BVI, sort of common law jurisdictions that have very similar rules as the ones in the US. So we the modification, even though we use US laws and US rules, they still need to be changed because the founders' needs and the market is slightly different in the Middle
Right.
East. Like a lot of people in the Middle East believe stock options violate Sharia.
Right.
I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not a Sharia lawyer, but convincing someone that stock options do not violate Sharia is a futile exercise. Once people have a religious conviction, it's very hard to change.
Right.
So we came up with something that mimics stock options, but that is what they believe is Sharia compliant. So we have to make these, I guess, cultural adaptations to make, because in the US, no one does, it's non-voting stock. We use non-voting stock.
Right.
No one in the US uses non-voting stock. They just use stock options. But here, a lot of our clients like to use non-voting stock. So it's like you have to make little adjustments to make it work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I want to, I'm gonna get dive deep into all the different regulations and stuff. But before that, I just want to speak more about your career to becoming a partner. People who are interested in law probably don't know what's the career to becoming a partner. How do you get there? Uh, can we hear a little bit about this,
Yeah.
please?
So in the US, there's a very strict path. You do your undergrad, you go get your JD, then you usually clerk for a judge, and then you work at a firm. And then if you're lucky, after 10 years, they make you partner. So I went through that whole system. And then about 5 years ago, I was based in DC with my family. We decided to move back to Jordan. I'm from Jordan.
Okay.
And it was a great decision. I wanted my kids to grow up in the Middle East, learn Arabic. And luckily, this industry that I worked in DC happened to be booming here too. So it was a very good time to do it. Since moving back, we had two more kids. So our family's growing. And yeah, it's been a very good, very rewarding experience to come back home.
Uh, Here's kind of a question, and you became a partner in the US. That's a dream for many people, becoming a
Mm.
law partner at a firm in the US. And you decided to leave that and come back to the
Yeah.
MENA region to build something new. How did you factor in this decision?
Um, at some point, I wanted to do something for the region. I wanted to be closer to my parents. In the US, you're just one of a million lawyers.
Right.
Here, I think I can make an impact. My templates are being used throughout the Middle East. The people copy and paste them all the time, which makes me very happy. I'm very happy about that. But I can make, I think, more of a change here. And
Okay.
also work-life balance. I see my kids grow up, I spend time with them. You can't put a price tag on that. So,
You know what I've realized from speaking to I've done 21 episodes up until now and spoke with a lot of founders. A lot of them had great jobs, were working in investment banking, had careers at Uber, Careem, corporate jobs, and they leave that to work at a startup, to work at something they're passionate about, to leave an impact in the world. Their number one thing is not financial thinking. It's about their passion and the impact they're going to leave. And I appreciate that in a lot of founders and people I've interviewed. So it's great to think about it from a passion and impact point of view.
yeah. I mean, if you don't love what you do, don't do it. Right? People, you can't pay you enough to do it. I'm very lucky. I really enjoy what I do. I like the substance. I like the law. I like the people. I mean, it's been great to do this kind of work here. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so, as a firm, you deal with startups, venture capital, and private equity. Are these the three areas you mostly deal with in terms of
Um,
clients?
those are my areas.
Okay.
We're a bigger firm. We have about 40 lawyers. We have people that do criminal law and litigation and arbitration, the whole spectrum.
Right.
My practice area is the VC startup world. That's sort
Okay.
of what I eat and breathe and live and dream of all day.
Okay. Then let's jump and dive deep into
Right,
each of these.
right, right. Yeah,
Let's start with startups first. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take startups, venture capital, and private equity firms, and kind of go with how do you serve each, some questions that some people
sure.
might have. Starting with startups, first question that always comes to mind, if I'm a founder, I'm just starting my startup, I may not have the capital or financial abilities to pay a firm like Levari, a law firm. How do you start working with startups and founders at this early stage, or you don't? Like, what's the procedure usually?
So we do a lot of pro bono work. We have
Okay.
clinic hours, all our forms, my templates are always available for free. We do training sessions. So I can't serve everyone one-on-one for free. Otherwise, I can't
Right.
afford my mortgage. So we try to do our part, especially because I'm originally Palestinian, especially Palestinian entrepreneurs. We do a lot of pro bono work for them. Um, so the early stage, usually you can get some kind of free resource. You
Okay.
know, we gave a talk a month back on ESOPs. I shared all my templates and I showed, I think, 40, 50 startups how to do ESOP plans. You only really need us and hire us when you have your first capital raise, your first
Okay.
real VC capital raise. Until then, you can probably get by doing stuff on a napkin.
Okay. Uh, Let's go from that because I know here there's a lot to cover. If I'm a founder in the region, should I register, and I'm working, let's say, based off KSA, should I register my company just in KSA, or should I register my company, let's say, in Delaware in the US, and then have subsidiaries in the region to be able to cover the region? Like, how should I go about structuring and registering my company as a startup?
Yeah. So we tell people to register wherever they are first. Usually that's the easiest. So if you're in Saudi, register in Saudi. When your first real investor comes, your first VC, and they're ready to put a real ticket, which should be about 200, 250,000 or more. That's sort of when startups sort of grow up a little bit.
Right.
That's when we register a holding company for you in the US. And then that becomes the holding company and it owns all the operating
Okay.
companies in Saudi or Egypt. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And when I register my company in the US, would I be able to work in other companies other than KSA, or should I go ahead and register in each country as I go?
So again, I personally take a very practical approach. I think if we went by the book, you're supposed to register in every jurisdiction you're in. But we tell people you register where your market is, where your customers are. So usually for startups, the first two they open, I mean, first two subsidiaries they open is KSA and Egypt, the two main markets in the Middle East. Then we see, oh, we have a lot of clients in, I don't know, Jordan. Then we'll open a company in Jordan. Or I have a big back office in Palestine. Then I open a back office in Palestine. But if I have one freelancer in Oman, I'm not going to open a company just for them. So we sort of follow where the startup is going. But 99% of the time, everyone opens in Egypt and in Saudi because those are the two main markets.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are common mistakes you see founders falling in?
The main one is most of them fail to have a discussion. I'm not saying agreement because most of them don't have agreements. There's plenty of resources online and videos and YouTube, like so much stuff is online. Founders need to know that once you enter into a partnership or a startup with someone else, your shares aren't yours forever. You are subject to a vesting schedule.
Right.
This can be as simple as an email, like 4 years, 1 year cliff, vesting monthly after the first year. So that if someone leaves, someone usually does leave, their shares don't stay with them because They need to go back to the company to give them to another founder. That is, I would think, the number one thing is you have this guy that owns 25% and doesn't do anything for the company.
Okay. Okay. So going about agreements, should they have a regular agreement, everything on paper, or is it an email, a text? Like what abides them? Like what puts them as a binding agreement for it to be
Right.
legalized?
So again, we take practical approach. Technically, they're supposed to hire us from day one, but most startups can't afford a lawyer from day one. So we tell people until your first investment comes, because that's usually when they can afford us. So when that
Right.
ticket is coming, they can carve out a little amount for us, and then so we just tell them, even if you just agree on a one pager, you own 50, I own 50, we're going to vest on 4 years, and everyone, people sign it. That because what you want is you want people to have the same understanding. Then once they can afford a lawyer, I can take this one pager and turn it into an agreement.
Okay.
But a lot of times we tell people it's better to spend your money on the product and marketing than it is on legal fees. Like we
Right.
say that. So if there's nothing worth fighting over, why even have the agreement, right? So go build something worth fighting over, and then
Come to
I'll help
us.
you fight over it.
Okay. Uh, Now we got to the point where they have okay, they register a startup, they have a legal agreement between the founders. They want to raise funds. Do they need a lawyer or a law firm to help them raise the funds, or they don't need that? Do you offer these kind of services where you're helping startups raise funds? Let's deep dive into this sector.
So we usually get involved when they're raising funds. So
Okay.
that's really our first encounter with the startup is when they call us and they say, I have an investor. They want me to sign a safe. The safe note is the main way startups raise money now. Please have a look at it and let me know if I'm getting a good deal. What's surprising is over the years, the safe note's available. They can
Right.
download. They don't need us. But what they do need us for is because we've worked on so many transactions, they want to know, is this normal? Is this the market practice? Is this investor crazy or am I crazy as the founder, right? So
Right.
that's sort of the role we play. Like, no, discount rate of 50% is ridiculous. It should be 20%. Like things, that's sort of where we come in, is
Right.
benchmarking what the market norm is.
Okay. Um, as a law firm, and you've dealt with many investors, many VC firms, many private equities. If a founder, like, do you offer services in terms of founders can come up to you and be like, "Hey, I want to raise. Could you introduce me to investors? Could you introduce me to private equity firms?" Do you offer any type of these services?
It's not explicit. We do it for our clients.
Okay.
It's not something I charge for. You know, it's just one of the benefits of being a client of our
Right.
firm, like being part
Okay.
of the club. Yeah.
Okay. Um, when they're raising, could they raise publicly? Like, I'm a founder, I'm on LinkedIn or Twitter. Could I go ahead and put a tweet? I'm looking for investors. Are there laws against that in the region? What are the laws in terms of raising funds for my startup?
Yeah. There are technically securities laws in the Middle East are not the most robust. In the US, the Securities Act was enacted in 1933, so we've had about 100 years. You're not supposed to do it, but what I tell people is don't do it because it makes you look desperate. So
Right.
it's an awful way to raise money. At that early stage, you're really looking for money plus. You're looking for money plus experience plus market act. You're looking for combination, um, which means you probably have to target. You have a list of investors. These are the people with deep pockets, and that can also help my startup.
Okay. Um, we're here at the point where, okay, a founder raised funds. I want to ask, you worked in the US and you worked in the region. what are some stuff we still lack in the region to be on the level where the US or Europe is in terms of startups, legal structures?
The main issue in the region is we have two or three dueling systems.
Okay.
We have the US system, we have the UK system, and we have the European system, which is not very prevalent, but it's the battle between the US and the UK. US lawyers like me that come in, of course, we use the forms that we know and use it all over the region. The UK lawyers that come in want to use their own forms. So we have this constant battling. Most of it is settled by where the company is incorporated, which is why that question is very important here. Because if you register in a UK jurisdiction, you're sort of in the UK track. If you register in a US in Delaware, you're in the US track.
Okay.
That is the main sort of, and they have slightly different terms and terminology. Ideally for us, we should have one, like in the US, we use the National Venture Capital Association forms, which most people hate. They're not great, but everyone knows them and everyone uses them, right?
Okay.
So
What can we do to get the region to be unified? Is it speaking with the people in the governments and the regulatory systems? What can we do to have these systems unified across all countries in the region?
it's mostly where the startups decide to register. The issue is the two jurisdictions in the region that are startup friendly are based under UK law, not US. And if you go to the Gulf, if you go to the GCC, it leans more towards UK law. A lot of startups in Egypt, Jordan, Palestine are more US leaning. It's fine, I guess. At some point, what I think will happen eventually is there will be sort of a hybrid US, UK, Middle East system that can accommodate both.
Okay.
Which
That
isn't a
makes
bad,
sense. Yeah.
yeah.
And then at the end of the day, when we think about it, we as a region should have our own kind of mixture that fits us, and maybe this hybrid thing is the best fitting way to have a better unified system for the whole region. We spoke about startups. The next kind of on the list is venture capitalists. How do you serve venture capitalists? Do you have like if I as Ahmed want to start a VC firm, how should I structure it? Should I come to you right away, be like, hey, I want to structure a VC firm? Like, what's the structure? If I have a partner, you
Okay.
tell me.
So we've done a few. I think we now work with about a dozen VC firms in the Middle East. We've done everything from the design phase, which is the fun part. So I want you to come as early as possible because the
Okay.
design phase is a lot of fun. Because we work with so many, we can usually tell you where the gaps are. Like for anyone listening, we have a massive gap in distressed funding. Right now, the market took a hit. There are a lot of startups hitting rock bottom. VCs aren't really primed for that. So someone with a distressed fund can probably come in and make a lot of money. Right? So that's missing in the market. Sort of someone is a restructuring distressed investing. So yeah, during the design phase, we have to find where your fund will fit in the landscape.
Okay.
Because when you go to your investors to raise money, they're going to ask you, and how are you, what makes you special? So you need a very good story. And I actually like building that story with the fund manager. It's
Okay.
probably the best part of creating funds.
Okay. What interesting fun stories have you created?
So the ones that target the niche ones are really good, where they sort of analyze the market and see one fund targets the seed to Series A. There's a little gap between when people raise a seed, and it's called the bridge fund.
Right.
And their job is to sort of take you from seed and move you to Series A. those are like, that was a nice project to work on. We also worked on a story where there's a growth fund. You already did the Series A and you sort of need to accelerate growth so that you could get to the B, C, D stage. The more niche you are, I think, the more interesting your story. I think generic sort of general funds, I'm not, you know,
You're not a fan of.
way to remember them.
Okay.
And not yet. We still don't have industry specific. I mean, we have a few fintech funds, but we don't really have like logistics focused fund. We did work with a fund in Saudi that did just property technology. So that was a lot of fun.
Okay.
They picked the sector, they went for it, and it's, you know, they knew exactly what they were doing. I think sector specific funds will probably be the next
Phase.
phase. Yeah.
What's here's a kind of a tangent before I continue on. What's the secret with fintech funds and fintech startups in the region?
I think it's a reaction to the bad banking system that we have.
Okay.
Um, our banking system in the Middle East is unfortunately brick and mortar still, very tedious, a lot of very bureaucratic. I can never tell if I'm going to the bank or if I'm going to some ministry, right, to get my passport renewed. It's the same sort of um, process, right? It's
Right.
very bureaucratic. It's so it was an easy, it was the low hanging fruit, right?
Okay.
I mean, it used to take me like a day to pay my electric and water bills, and now I can pay them over the phone.
Right.
So
It's a
big pain point, very easy fix. Just connect bank account to another bank account.
like,
So it
right.
was
I came to you. I structured my VC firm. We established the story. I'm going to raise funds. Typically, people are raising in the region from LPs, government funds. Is that usually the case? How are these? What's the deal structure there? Like, are they this? Are they like as a VC firm? Am I telling my investors, okay, I have a deal, I have a 3x returns, 4x returns. Is it binding by the agreement we have? Like, what's the sort of agreement me as a VC fund manager establishing with my LPs?
so that is a limited partnership agreement. The target rate of return is 20% per year. That's sort of what everyone tries to achieve. I don't know if they do. Um, the LPs so far in the region are all fund of funds backed by the government because we don't have a liquid or active private market yet. It's getting there, but usually the government has to step in and sort of start this market by providing the capital. Um, Granted, some funds don't make any money, right? These are equity investments. They bear all the risk. We are getting some exits. That's sort of what spurs more money is you get a good exit. Oh, I should have invested. You know, people
Yeah.
join. And, yeah.
Why don't we see more exits in the region?
I think a big part of it is market fragmentation.
Okay.
So you'll find the same startup in like 4 different countries. I'll find the
Right.
same startup that does logistics in Saudi and another one in Kuwait and another one in UAE. So I'm going back to a little market niche for a fund would be a merger fund.
Right.
Fund would go in and find the 2, 3 companies in 2, 3 different countries that all do pretty much the same thing and say, here's a bunch of money, consolidate so that you can become a bigger company and then you can have an exit. So
Okay.
to have an exit requires size. And
Right.
so without size, no one's going to look at you. And we still have that, you know, where we've got one startup and a lot of our countries are very small, but you'll find
Right.
duplicates of the same startup in like 10 different places.
Okay. And it's interesting because I'm Lebanese, but I've been living in the US for the past 5 years, and I'm really interested in startup world, sometimes private equity. I'm just curious. I'm a curious human being, as they say. And what's really interesting here is rolling fund, not rolling fund, sorry, SMB funds, funds that focus on SMBs. They go in and they roll up. They're like, okay, let's say plumbing. I'm going away from startup, but plumbing companies. They go and acquire five, six plumbing companies, form a big company, and after 5 years they sell to big private equity firms. Uh, we don't hear about that in the region, and I'm surprised because I know there's a lot of great SMBs or great startups that bring in revenue, but they're fragmented, as you said. They focus on Egypt, they focus on KSA, and it's duplicates, as you said. If someone comes in, roll up these startups, makes them bigger, sells to private equity firms, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be yeah, yeah, that would be perfect. And then the larger startups in, let's say, Saudi, to acquire, there's a lot of still sensitivity to being acquired.
Okay.
Um, you don't acquire me, I acquire, there's a little bit of this. So and I mean, I think it will change because the founders will realize by joining forces, even though you have a smaller percentage, you don't run the show, you at least have a better shot of having an exit and actually realizing your returns, like
Yes.
realizing all
Yes.
the growth.
2% of 10 million, 2% of 100 million is better than 2% of 10 million. Uh, Here's a question for both VCs and startups. How does due diligence happen uh, in terms of VCs? Like, do you guys offer due diligence service? How do you guys go about due diligence for VCs when they want to invest in startups?
Right. So half my day is doing due diligence, and the other half of my day is doing the transaction work.
Okay,
About my day is split. So we do the investigation, we look at everything, we look at all the documentation, we screen, we look at bank statements. I have some forensic experience, so I'm able to look at bank statements and screen for fraud or unusual financial transactions. But what a lot of, because we're getting a lot of US VCs coming into the region.
right.
The nice thing about the region is it's a small market, everyone knows everyone. So a lot of the due diligence is also knowing who the founders are and who their family is,
Okay,
right? So like some people, we know who they are and we've known them for a long time. So that also serves as a check.
okay,
But we still do the traditional, checklist. We look at everything.
okay, okay. Yeah, because recently in the US and for the past week, we've heard about FTX and all these investments in FTX from large firms. And what was the due diligence? And I think the region, because as you said, is a smaller market, people know each other more, and everyone knows everyone in the ecosystem. Due diligence is a little bit easier to perform in these type of markets.
Yeah. Yeah, people still are not used to, like, when I send my request, please send me all these documents. I still get the what? Why do you need all this?
Well, you're asking for money. I need to make sure
Right,
you're the
exactly.
correct startup.
Um, yeah, I mean, we look at customer contracts, we screen for revenue concentration, any type of potential risk that could affect the investor. Our job is to find it and
Right.
disclose it, and then it's up to the investor if they want to invest or not.
And it's surprising when a founder doesn't want to go through the due diligence process. It's like, oh, I just want to take free money and you just have to give me it. Well, no, I'm investing money. I have LPs I want to answer for. I want to make sure the startup is the right fit for my fund. We spoke about startups, venture capital, that's private equity. Uh, I don't let's define what private equity does. I don't think in the region it's a common term. You could tell me it's different, but what's a private equity? How do you deal with private equities? How do you service private equities firms in the region?
Um, Private equities are more risk averse, like VC investing. You're sort of investing for tremendous growth. Private equity, yep, they're also looking for tremendous growth, but the type of companies they're investing in tend to be later stage, more mature. you're doing a reorg or you're aggregating or merging them, it's less exciting, right? Because there's nothing sort of, no one's gonna, the goal is not to find the next Uber or Facebook or
Right.
whatever. It has shot up a little bit because with COVID, the real estate market, I think, I know at least in Jordan, took a massive hit. People
Right.
started working from home. You had dark, since COVID, I don't think I've been out to a restaurant like twice. You order everything, right?
Yes.
So the demand for real estate, especially commercial real estate, I think has gone down across the board. And a lot of our investors in the region tend to be traditional investors.
Okay.
I build a building, I rent it, or I lease it or sell it. Private equity gets close to giving you the kind of returns that real estate investors are used to, sort of
Okay.
dividends, recurring cash flow. So I am seeing a bit of an uptick for it. I don't know if it's going to win. Other players are coming in, like venture debt. Um, we launched two products for another client where they're financing cars through a mini private equity firm that we created for
Okay.
them. Again, they are all targeting the former real estate investor. So that segment is not being served by the VC market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Here's a question I have. So VCs invest in startups. Uh, PEs come invest in different sectors. And PEs usually invest in big, large companies. Who comes and then acquires these companies? Like, how does a PE make profit later on? Who does a PE sell to in the region?
So PE is supposed to just generate dividends, right?
Okay.
They may do an IPO, they may merge, like we worked on a deal where they aggregated a bunch of medical manufacturing companies in the Middle East,
Okay.
Morocco, Egypt, and Jordan. They put them all together and then they sold it to a European as
Okay.
one group. And then the European got access to the entire Middle East, the
Okay.
European company. So that's another option.
Okay.
Uh,
We spoke about mergers, whether it's startup merging. Now we spoke about private equity merging. What makes for a good merger or good acquisition? Like if you're a lawyer and you have a client and they want your advice about what makes a good merger or acquisition, what would be your like three, four criteria on the list?
the first is whether it's going to benefit the client. It also depends on where the client is. So clients that are looking to retire, I'm 70, I'm done, my kids don't want the business. My criteria is going to be very different than I'm a 30-year-old. I've got another 30 years ahead of me. So their deal is going to look very different. The people looking to retire, they just want to sort of pass the baton over. They want to cash out a little bit. And they don't want any involvement afterwards because they want to go sailing in the Mediterranean or whatever it is. The 30-year-old wants to merge or sell, but then join the new company and take a very active role. So their employment agreement actually becomes the main agreement that we argue over, not the merger agreement.
Right.
No one cares about that. The only focus becomes what are the employment terms because I'm not done. I'm not retiring. I've got another 30 years ahead of me.
Okay.
So that's sort of what we look
Let's
for.
focus on. Okay. Well, it, it's here recently in the past 2 or 3 years, we started listening about, okay, I'm gonna buy an SMB, a small medium business, that generates I'm 21, I'm gonna buy an SMB that generates $500,000, $600,000 a year, and I'm gonna just get passive income. Well, you're 21, get to work, be active. And it just this concept of passive income that a lot of people just they want to buy a business, just retire when they're young. Work, do some work, and then retire when you're 50, 60 at this
Yeah.
point.
I mean, you should have passive income. It's good, but you should also have a day job.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
Now here's a question. We know in general funds in the region, they raise money from family offices, government funds, fund of funds. Uh, Recently, there's been a term of crowdfunding.
Yeah.
What's the regulation around crowdfunding? What are your thoughts of crowdfunding in the region to get more access to capital for startups and funds?
So crowdfunding, it's a good idea. It happens in the US, Kickstarter, and there are a bunch of websites like that.
Right.
I don't think it's a main vehicle. Like, I don't think it's going to change access to capital. Because whoever invests through a crowdfunding platform is just sort of putting in $500 because they feel like it. But it's not an institutional or a major change in how people are investing.
Right.
So we've started working with angel groups as a way to supplement VC funds. And that is where high net worth individuals can invest on a per deal basis.
Okay.
Yeah, Ahmed, you're too inexperienced, for example. I'm not saying you are. I'm not going to give you $10 million to invest the way you want. You go get me a bunch of deals. If I like them, I'll invest. But the decision is with me as the investor, not with you as the fund manager.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of traction for this.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
These are some fun questions. What industries do you have your eye on in the region? Like, what industries you're like, okay, if I was a private equity firm, I'm a startup, if I'm a VC, and you look at a lot of deals. So, what are your niche industries? Like, okay, people are missing on this one.
I'm big on legal analytics. Like, I think I only really invest in legal tech because that's something I understand. I don't know anything else. There's I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but there is something's going to happen in the legal system or in the practice of law where lawyers are going to be able to use legal data to make better decisions.
Okay.
Right now I do it a little bit, but it's all anecdotally because
Could you elaborate on what you're talking about? And I'm asking this, what if a founder is hearing us and wants to go build that startup? Could you elaborate on the idea?
yeah, sure. So the ideal, the end product would be I would go to you and you're the lawyer and I would say, I want to sue so and so. You put in the facts into a computer, and the computer says chances of winning in Lebanon, for example, is 67%. The average award is 500,000.
Okay.
If what I'm telling you is all true, there's nothing like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But you need a lot of data to do that. You need a lot to look at all court closed data, each case by case, what were the factors, everything. And one problem we have in the region is we don't have a lot of documentation about these cases.
Right. So there is one company in the US that did something very close to it called Lex Machina, was
Okay.
acquired by LexisNexis, and they do just IP law. Well, maybe they expanded now, but that they started about 10 years ago, maybe longer now. They take IP cases, they aggregate the data, and they tell lawyers these are your chances of winning a trademark infringement or a patent infringement. That level of sort of aggregating that much information for cases, for deals, for like people ask me, is my valuation cap good? I just sort of look at what I did the last month and I say, yeah, it's good, right? I'm not a computer, but it would be nice if I could like actually see all my agreements that I've done
Okay.
and what the valuation actually give them a number.
Okay.
You know,
Um, if you said you like to invest in legal tech, let's say, do you love manufacturing, health tech? What other like kind of industries do you, other than legal tech, do you think about?
health tech is big. We are, I think, as a people, as Middle Easterner, we have a huge diabetes problem.
We eat a lot
We
of
have
we eat a lot of kunafa and ashta.
yeah, exactly. Anyone that can tackle real on the ground healthcare issues, delivery of medicine, delivery of healthcare, anything like that is, I mean, that's going to be, I think Saudi has one of the highest diabetes rates.
Right.
Uh, we also have very high smoking rates. So anyone that can tackle smoking cessation, um, and anything related to health care, I think is going to do very, very well.
Okay. Last question. If if you weren't a lawyer, what startup would you be building?
Probably something in data
Okay.
driven. I like using data and numbers to help figure out problem or help solve problems.
Okay. Hisham, that was a great episode. I really enjoyed it. I
Thank
think
you.
it's my first time sitting with a lawyer for 46 minutes, and I think it's a great experience. I really love it. Any plugins you want to give? Any last words you want to say? Uh,
Oh, just
feel
want to say thank you so much for hosting. Keep up. I mean, we need more podcasts like this. You know, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Hisham.